guys, it's your boy Luke here for our DFS preview for this week's Valspar Championship. A little bit of a different format for this week's video. Rather than separating it into my core picks, value picks, and fades and sleepers, we're going to be covering all of that here in this video. The idea, of course, to get you prepared for this week's slate for some of your GPP contests, cash contests, no matter what format you'll be entering. My goal is to get you guys completely prepared. And because we have so much to cover, we have no time to waste at all. Let's go ahead and hop right on into it. Alright guys, up on the screen you can see our projections for this week, and I'll remind you that as always, if you want direct access to these as they update throughout the week to use for your own projection systems, all that sort of fun stuff, make sure to check out my Patreon, just $1 for the month for access to all of this data for every golf tournament. Let's go ahead, before we hop into the player pool though, you can see we already have people marked down as core picks and whatnot. That's what we're going to start with. Why are we targeting these guys, right? Let's go ahead and hop into the key stats. So first and foremost, the number one thing we're looking at the Valspar Championship is shots gained approach. And most importantly, these long iron ranges. You can see I have the most weighting on the 150 to 175, 175 to 200, and even more on the 200 plus range at this golf course. First and foremost, you have 5 par 3s. Almost every single one is over 200 yards. The one that isn't is 195 yards. So you're going to be hitting a lot of long irons there. Of course, these par 5s are also all over 550 yards, which puts long iron in your hand on all 4 of those holes. And then you have 3 of the par 4s that are measuring over 460 yards. So those are automatic long irons as well, plus a couple other forced layups, which means that this course has by far the highest distribution of long irons of pretty much any course on tour. It rivals Quail Hollow, also what we see at the Arnold Palmer Invitational that also has a lot of those forced layups. So even though the scorecard yardage isn't all that long, you're definitely looking at the guys that are better with their, let's say, 5 or 6 irons than they are with their 9 or 8 irons. Moving on to the next stats, we have shots gained putting. You can see I'm using a combination of Bermuda, the bent POA, Bermuda grass mixture that we get here, and just total shots gained putting. We're taking a look at recent form. Some of the comp courses, we talked about Quail Hollow, East Lake, something I'm looking at, same thing with TPC, Southwind, and Sawgrass. Take a look at driving accuracy, club head speed. You see driving accuracy is emphasized a little bit more than club head speed. You have Copperhead shots gained, so that would be course history. Birdie a better percentage, shots gained around the green, specifically on Bermuda grass, which we'll get this week at Celebration Bermuda, and par 3 scoring. So with that out of the way, we're looking for ball strikers that can keep the ball in play, and of course that can make their fair share of putts on these hybrid surfaces, which is why we're taking a look at Viktor Hovland up top. He might not be the best putter on tour of late. He's been slightly better than average. He's also plugged the hole around the green, which has been super helpful. So that's why the recent form has just been absolutely immaculate for Hovland. You can see a 9th place finish, 2nd, 4th. The miscut at the Waste Management was his first for quite some time. We could definitely look at that as a little bit of an aberration. The course history, even though he only has 1 year of history here, he finished 3rd place last year. His ball striking came in handy. He's somebody who keeps it in play off the tee. He's one of the best approach players in the world, particularly with those long irons, 175 to 200 and 200 yards plus. He's top 10 in both of those categories, both out of the fairway and the rough. When you're top 5 or even top 10 like he is in all of those categories, it's going to go a long way, and that really solidifies him as one of the best long players in the world. Take a look at the most recent form metrics. You can see that he's gaining a ton of strokes with his ball striking, both off the tee, where he's gaining over 4/10 of a stroke per round, and on approach, where he's gaining over 8/10 of a stroke per round. Just absurd numbers right there. It's number 1 in the field in shots gained, ball striking, and not really close. Around the green, like I said, he's kind of plugged that hole. He's only losing just over 1/3 of a stroke per round, whereas we look at the last 50 measured rounds, it's nearly 3/4 of a stroke per round. In fact, exactly 3/4 of a stroke per round over his last 50 measured. That's something that if he can plug, even just keep it to where it is right now, he's going to be more than okay getting by. But one thing about the Valspar Championship, Innisbrook, the Copperhead course, is that getting up and down is a little bit easier, right? It's more of a country club type of setup. It's not meant like a TPC or a PGA National to really go out there and test these players. It's meant to be more of a fair test. Of course, the country club players play it from shorter distance, much slower green speeds, much lower cut rough, a lot of other factors that make it easier. But the main thing here is that the greens aren't always elevated. There's a few that are elevated like 18, a few of the par 3s as well, but a majority of them are at ground level. They don't have a ton of undulation to them, but while they run at like 12.5 to 13.5 on the stit meter, that can make getting up and down a little bit tricky. You're going to be dealing with very stock around the green shots. You're going to have a lot of options. You're going to be able to take it up in the air if you want to. You're going to be able to keep it along the ground, which means for guys like Viktor Hovland that don't have every shot in the bag, he should be able to get by where he's not going to be in jail all too often. Of course, if you're short-sighting yourself on one of these greens, it's going to be a hard chip shot like it would be at any golf course. But the real key factor here is that you're not going to be in some crazy bad situations. So in general, Viktor Hovland, he is going to be one of the chalkiest plays on the slate. As of right now, I have him as the projected highest owned play, but that's well warranted, coming at number 1 in recent form, Copperhead fit, and total model rank. In terms of his projection, he's only number 2 behind Justin Thomas. A lot of that comes down to JT's prolific scoring ability. A lot of times he outpaces his placement position because he makes so many birdies. But at the end of the day, with our core picks, we're looking for guys that are a little bit safer. Viktor Hovland definitely fits that bill up top. And he's somebody that I'm usually either using as a core play or as a complete fade week in and week out. I usually take very polarized stances on Viktor Hovland. He's won me a lot of money in the past. I've won $25,000 GPPs with him, but I've also faded him to a lot of success as well. It's really all comes down to the golf course, and it's usually that around the green play that's the X factor for me. And with these easy to read greens, I expect that to be something that he can take advantage of. Next up, we have Jason Kokrak at $9,200. I was tempted to go to Dustin Johnson up here at $10,200 for our second man in, but he's a little bit more expensive than I'm comfortable going to in that type of range. So let's go ahead and talk about Jason Kokrak. He's somebody who his course history here is a lot better than people would expect. He's made his cut every time here over the last 4 years. You can see a 13th, 2nd, 8th, and 58th place finish, all excellent for somebody like Kokrak. You go over to the recent form, he's also somebody who's been a little bit sneaky, I'd say, right? 53rd at the Players, 26th at the Genesis. He hasn't played all that much golf here to start the season, but when he's played, he's been making cuts. He got it towards the end of 2021, especially those last 3 or 4 events. He started to miss a few cuts. He really started to look a little bit sloppy off the tee. He's cleaned that up. He's won at the Colonial in the past. So one thing I heard about Kokrak, reason somebody was concerned to play him, was the off the tee accuracy, right? But there's one thing that Kokrak can do well. It's hit his irons dead straight. I mean, the guy's just an absolute striper of the golf ball with that approach play. And because there's so many forced layups, I would expect Jason Kokrak to do that a lot more than his competition. He's somebody who knows his weaknesses, and that's how he was able to win over there at Colonial, which is the king of courses when it comes to laying up. So I don't have any concerns about him, especially when we consider that performance. The course history, like I said, is definitely a little bit sneaky. And the recent form, even though he hasn't been in a great stretch of golf, right? He hasn't had any good finishes, really. A 26th place finish for Kokrak is disappointing to say the least. The shots gain metrics do reflect that. You can see he's still gaining with the approach play. So even in his worst stretch of golf, he's still a positive player in that category. But the off the tee accuracy has cost him some strokes. You can see that. Around the greens, never really his specialty. And if you go over here to the putting, it has still been a positive. That's why he's gaining to the field despite this really bad stretch of play over his last 24 measured rounds. But if you give him a little bit more of a leash, we take that out to the last 50 measured rounds, you can see he's still losing off the tee, but he's gaining more significantly on approach. The around the green is always going to be an issue, but gaining even more with the putter. So this isn't something that just came out of nowhere for Jason Kokrak. Ever since he made the change to a longer putter, got more comfortable over the ball. That's something that he did 2 years ago. The guy's just been absolutely lights out on the green. So I would expect that to continue. He's a high birdie or better percentage player, as you guys can see over here in the stats. Par 3 scoring, he's number 4 in the world. Like I said, there's 5 par 3s at this golf course, an extra par 3. So being really solid in that category is something to take advantage of. And there's still the 4 par 5s. So even though we do have an extra par 3, it's a par 4 that's converted to a par 3. So you still have to be able to take advantage of those. And in both of those categories, those are really where he excels. Where he's kind of fallen off this year on the par 4s, and there's one less this week. So maybe that's a little bit of good juju for Jason Kokrak. A little bit of a format change for the course will give him a little bit of positive momentum. Either way, though, the course history is elite. The recent form's been a little bit sneaky, and somebody who I'm looking to bounce back in a big way. Next up, we have Russell Knox, and he's technically my bread and butter play, but I guess you could say that him or Adam Hadwin are, right? They're both in this similar range here. Both could either be considered bread and butter plays or value plays. I digress. Either way, I love both of them this week. similar reasons, to be quite honest with you. Both of them extremely accurate off the tee, so we'll go ahead and lump them together. Also, both extremely solid with the irons. Now, Russell Knox, a little bit of a different league of his own with the irons than somebody like an Adam Hadwin, but Hadwin makes up for it with his putting. You can see the difference there, nearly half a stroke per round between the putting for these two individuals. And Adam Hadwin, somebody who's won this event before, right? So I think he's being a little bit slept on. He won back here in 2017. He had a 12th place finish in 2018. 2 missed cuts over the last 2 years, so that's slightly concerning. But if we go ahead and take a look at Russell Knox's course history, he has a 21st, 24th, 16th place finish. The missed cut there in 2017 wasn't ideal, right? We'd much rather see him made the cut all 4 years, but to see the fact that he's improved, he's had top 25 finishes the other 3 years, more than makes up for that. So for those two players, they're coming in with good course history, but also good recent form. So they have that rare combination of the two things we're looking for. You can see Adam had a 9th place finish last week. He did have a miscut at the Genesis, but a top 26 there at the Waste Management is good for somebody like an Adam Hadwin. Russell Knox, 33rd, 55th, 6th. Few other made cuts before the Waste Management as well, and in 4 out of his last 6 events, he's gained over 3 strokes with his ball striking. So this is somebody who's known to be a very accurate driver, really good in windy conditions, which we might not get this week at the Valspar. We might, right? So I guess it's good to have that skill in your back pocket. He's also somebody who's been insanely accurate with these irons. Let's go ahead and take a look at the shots gained metrics for both of these players. First off, Russell Knox gaining 0.8 of a stroke per round with the approach play, right up there with somebody like a Victor Hovland, gaining nearly 1/3 of a stroke off the tee per round. Much like Hovland, not very good around the green. The putter also much worse than Victor Hovland. That's why, and they're in different tiers here. It's why they're not the same type of player. But there's one thing Russell Knox can do is every once in a while he pops with that putter. And the only reason he hasn't finished in a top 5 or won a golf tournament over these last 2 months is because he hasn't popped with the putter. So I have a sneaking suspicion that Russell Knox is going to do that over this next month. I mean, if he continues this ball striking and he can find that hot putter, he's winning an event. Like, mark it down right now. Unless somebody takes the place nuclearly low that same week, Russell Knox is going to win a golf tournament. So I'm going to be playing him in DFS until that happens. Adam Hadwin, not nearly as exciting with that top end upside, right? Off the tee has been right around neutral. That shouldn't be as much of an issue this week. Off the tee is a little bit neutralized. The lack of distance, a lot of the laying up that players are going to be doing. But it's great to see him being solid with the approach, gaining over 1/3 of a stroke per round. Around the green is something that he's a little bit better at. So, right, it's not something that I'm actively looking for in players this week, but to have it around the green play is surely a boost, and the putter has been a lot more consistent. Adam Hadwin, also somebody who, when he gains significantly with the putter, that's usually 6 or 7 strokes to the field. He really gets that thing working. That's really what you're hoping for with an Adam Hadwin. If he's able to do that, be a slight gainer off the tee like he does from time to time, be a significant gainer on approach, that would be his avenue to a top 5. And for winning upside, I'm not necessarily sure that Hadwin has it, at least with this field strength. A lot of the guys up top, like a Morikawa, Hovland, JT, eat a lot of that win equity up. But at the same time, for DFS, when we're looking for a top 5 or top 10 to pay it off, he's more than capable of getting that type of thing done. Let's move on to our flyer pick, or actually this would be our diamond in the rough. Our flyer pick will be next up. Mito Pereira, though, for our diamond in the rough is going to be at $7,200. He comes in as a great recent form rank. The Copperhead fit is really what we're looking at here. It's why he's a top 10 fit for the field for me. If you take a look at the recent form, it hasn't been that great, right? He had a miscut the last time out. He was in the bad wave for the player, so I'm willing to give him a little bit of leeway there. But a 30th at the Honda, of course, that really didn't fit his game. At least he made the cut. 15th at the Genesis, that's a really solid performance in an extremely strong field, and then missed cut at the Waste Management. So he's kind of been all over the place, right? He's got a few missed cuts in there. I kind of want to ignore this one at the Players because of the field, though. If we take a look at the course history, it's going to be non-existent, so we don't have to take a look at that. But the shots gained metrics, it's kind of been all over the place as well. And I want to show you guys just the difference between his last 24 measured rounds and his last 50 measured rounds. His last 24, he's a gainer across the board. Slight gainer off the tee. Slight gainer on approach. Around the green, very slight gainer. And with the putter, it's really where he's gaining a majority of his strokes, gaining over 1/3 of a stroke per round. In total, that puts him at nearly 7/10 of a stroke per round. That's among the elite in the field, and he's doing it in a very sneaky fashion, right? Kind of just getting it done across the board, not killing himself in any category. But if you take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, it really couldn't be any more different. So first off, he's gaining much more significantly on approach, over half a stroke per round, 1/4 of a stroke per round off the tee. That's almost 2/10 of a stroke more more per round than what we saw for the last 24 measured rounds. Around the green, right around neutral. Right, you can get away with that, right? You can be a neutral around the green player for sure. At the putter, much closer to neutral. So which player is he, right? Is he the guy that's a ball striking phenom, or is he this guy that we've seen over the second half of those 50 measured rounds that's really been getting it done with the putter? I think he's a combination of the two. I think he's gone hot with one, kind of gone cold with the other, and vice versa over his start of his career. Early on, he had both working. You guys remember he was an absolute phenom with the ball striking right away on tour, but he also had that hot putter for a tournament or two and finished in the top 5. I think that's definitely in Mito Pereira's range of outcomes. So at $7,200, definitely somebody I think has real top 5 or even winning upside at this event. He's somebody who's going to be clubbing down a lot. So even though he might not be the most accurate driver on tour, in fact, if you take a look at his metrics over here, he's extremely inaccurate. You can see, first off, his driving distance, 86 on tour. That's pretty solid. I think by the end of the year, he'll be closer to like 20 or 30 on tour when he gets more of a sample size. But with driving accuracy, he's never going to be in that top 100. He tends to spray it from time to time. But if he can club down at this course, like so many of the great players have, right? Jason Kokrak, also not known for his driving accuracy, but has still been able to get it done here, mostly due to his elite iron play, which Mito Pereira also has, and his elite putting, which Mito has been an elite putter over his last 2 months. So I do like going to him. I think he fits that same type of mold, high birdie or better percentage as well, and somebody that I'll have quite a big investment in. And lastly, for our flyer pick, it's going to be Austin Smotherman at $6,400. Way down the board, right? Somebody who you're going to get plenty of salary flexibility by taking. But if we take a look, and I just want to start off here with the last 50 measured rounds, show you his long iron stats. He's been unbelievable, right? So he's down here at $6,400. He's getting nearly half a stroke per round off the tee, over half a stroke per round on approach. Insane for somebody that's just getting out here on tour, and this is a very relatively large sample size. And we take a look at the long irons, this is really where he's been making his hay. From 150 to 175, 13 in the world. From 175 to 200, 24 in the world. From 200 plus, 24 in the world. This guy is a top 25 player in the 3 key categories that we're looking at for approach this week. That is exactly what I was hoping to see. Of course, the ball striking stats in general have been absolutely incredible. Around the green's kind of been his bugaboo to this point. Same thing with the putter. He hasn't quite been very good with the short game. But one thing we've seen at this golf course over the years is the around the green play is easy, like I said, but the putter also rewards some of the worst putters on tour. We've seen guys like Keegan Bradley have really solid putting performances here. Paul Casey comes to mind as well, a multiple time winner. In general, you're just looking for the guys that can put themselves in position, because with how pure these greens roll, people tend to make a lot more putts. So he's got the ball striking we're looking for. Again, those long irons are among the elite in the world. If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, just to give you an idea of how he's been playing of late, you can see he's gaining over a third of a stroke per round on approach, still gaining off the tee, so he's actually been better there in the past. Around the green, right around where it was for those last 50 measured rounds. And the putter's been a little bit better. So if he can continue that momentum with the putter, be closer to a neutral putter, continue to gain significantly with those ball striking categories, I not only think he goes out there and makes a cut this week, I also think he has a really solid chance to go out there and finish in the top 10 or top 5. All right, and now for the value picks. First off, we're going to have Johnny Vegas at $7,500. He's somebody who hasn't been in the best form of late, and even despite not having any great finishes, is still putting up respectable ball striking numbers. If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds for Johnny, he's gaining close to a third of a stroke per round off the tee, still gaining with the approach category. Around the greens, never really a strong suit for him, and right around neutral with the putter. Over the last 50 measured rounds, though, you can see it starts to get a little bit better. He's gaining close to half a stroke per round off the tee, closer to a third of a stroke per round on approach, and still right around neutral with the putter. If he can get back to that type of build, that type of skill set, I expect him to have a lot of success this week, particularly with so many of those approach shots coming from the 175 plus range, which tends to be one of the better ranges for Johnny Vegas. If we take a look at the recent form, it hasn't been anything special. In fact, it's been quite mediocre. If we take a look at it, missed cut, 42nd, 55th, and that was despite having those good ball striking numbers. So the short game definitely has to improve for him to really make a splash at this event. But towards the end of 2021, and even in the fall swing there at the beginning of this season, you started to see him have those performances. That's why over the last 50 measured rounds, even though he's had some really, really bad putting weeks, he's still right around a neutral putter because he has the ability to go out there and pop from time to time. So somebody who's coming in with right around average ownership for this range is definitely somebody I'll be using as one of my middle tier 7K options. Another option I'll be going to is going to be Lanto Griffin at $7,400. The modeling also consistent across the board, whether it's recent form, Copperhead fit, or total model rank. He's also somebody who, despite missing the cut last time out at the Players Championship, has been in really good form. I mean, for Lanto Griffin, he's one of the more consistent players on the PGA Tour. He got the bad end of the split there for the Players Championship, so not a surprise that he missed the cut. But a 52nd at the API, 39th at the Genesis Invitational, and over his last 24 measured rounds, you can argue that there hasn't been a better player in this range. He's gaining off the tee, which for Lanto isn't always a consistent part of his game, right? He's a little bit volatile off the tee, but been really solid with the approach play, which is a consistent thing for Lanto, getting near close to half a stroke per round. Around the green's been right about average. He's typically actually a little bit better than that. And the putter's also been right about average. You can see for his career, he's gaining a third of a stroke per round on Bermuda grass, so we could expect to see that rebound. If he can continue that ball striking, that's been carrying his game over the last month or so, he could really go out there and post a top 10 or even a top 5 finish. So at $7,400, he's certainly getting a fair amount of ownership there at 8.8%. But at the same time, I like the course fit. I think the recent form, even with that missed cut, is a little bit underrated and somebody that I'll definitely be using for some salary flexibility. Next up, we have Pat Perez, another guy coming in with some solid recent form. He's also, whether it's recent form, Copperhead fit, checking all of the boxes that we're looking for. Let's go ahead and do a deep dive on the shots gained metrics, though, which are extremely impressive for somebody like a Pat Perez. So here at $6,900, you can see off the tee, that's never going to be a strong suit for him, but the approach play, the around the green, and even the putting has been absolutely spectacular for Pat Perez. And one thing that we mentioned before is that driving distance is a little bit mitigated here. As long as you're good with some of those long iron clubs, you're going to be able to get away with it. And because he's been so solid with that approach play over the last month or so, I would expect that to continue. If we take a look at the course history, he hasn't played there all that often. He also hasn't had a ton of success, but the last time out in 2021, he did make the cut and finish in 29th place. So he at least has that going for him. The recent form has been much better over the last month or so than we've quite frankly seen for years from Pat Perez. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and win that golf tournament. He's certainly somebody that has a high floor, though, and also a relatively consistent player. So if you're playing in cash, you're looking for more of a safe option down low. At $6,900, I think you could do a whole lot worse. Next up, we're going to talk about Troy Merritt at $6,600 as a value play. You actually get a really solid price tag on him. He's accurate off the tee, something that I'm definitely looking for this week, as evidenced with a lot of our targets at the core picks. He's also somebody who's been solid with the approach play at late. So if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds for a Troy Merritt down here at $6,600. A slight gainer on approach off the tee has actually been a bright spot for him. That's how accurate he's been over these last few events. Around the green, definitely leaves a little bit to look for. Same thing with the putting, but at the same time, despite not having his best stuff, he's gone through, he's made some cuts for us. So we take a look at the recent form for a Troy Merritt. You can see 46th, 74th. Did miss the cut at the Genesis, but a 38th at the Waste Management. So the guy's been getting through, at least paying it off in the DFS standpoint. And this is somebody who, let's take a look at the course history as well for Troy Merritt. I know he's played here before. He finished 8th here last year. That's something that's great to see. And then a few missed cuts. So he's certainly going to be a little bit volatile. You've seen him have some good starts at this event. You've seen him make some cuts of late. If he can piece together that approach play that's typically a lot better than right around neutral for a Troy Merritt, he continues to hit the ball off the tee, can go out there and gain a few strokes with the putter. That's asking a lot, but he does have a clear path to finishing in the top 10 here. Again, a few things do have to fall into place, but for somebody at $6,600 in these large field type of GPPs, again, like a few of the other guys on this list, I think you could do a whole lot worse. Next up, let's go over to Wesley Bryan. He's also a value pick I'm considering. He's only $6,300, so he's really cheap. We're starting to get to the bottom of the board here, but there are a few guys that I like going to. Wesley Bryan has played here before. He's also found some success. So if we bring up his course history here, you can see that Wesley Bryan had a 48th here last year, but he's 7th place here in 2017. So somebody who, again, of late hasn't quite been his self. If you take a look at the recent form, he's at least made some cuts of late, but he hasn't really done anything special for quite some time. You see miscut at the Honda, miscut at the Waste Management, a few made cuts during the fall swing. That's why these shots gained metrics look as good as they do. Even with those two missed cuts, let's take a look at it, because it's impressive. It's why we're going to him. He's losing off the tee, which Wesley Bryan, one of the shorter hairs on tour, that's always going to be the case, but gaining significantly on approach, around the green, right about average, and a slight gainer with the putter. But of course, that approach play has been unbelievable. This guy has always been known for his approach play, but he's also always been known as a really bad driver. So we usually target him at the shorter golf courses, but the beauty with this course is that you have a lot of those forced layups, and he tends to be extremely accurate with the driver and also with his 3-wood. So somebody I do expect to have some success this week, particularly if he can keep himself in the short grass. And again, he's done it in the past, right? 2017, finished in 7th place. Last year, made the cut at the very least. And Wesley Bryan, at this stage of his career, it's not like he's super old or anything like that. He's just not the same player that he was 3 or 4 years ago. So it's good to see him making the cut there last year. Somebody who, if he went out there and made the cut at $6,300, I'm pretty sure we would be more than thrilled with that performance. Go down to our last value pick, which is going to be Cameron Percy at $6,100. He's also somebody that the modeling likes, mostly due to his approach play. So over his last 24 measured rounds, much like a Wesley Bryan, he's gaining with approach, he's gaining off the tee as well. The putter has actually been a bright spot for him. He's typically a much worse putter than right around neutral. And if we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, so we give him even more of the sample size, you'll see that this isn't just an aberration. First off, Wesley Bryan also gaining a bunch of strokes on approach. But if we go down here, bring up our board Cameron Percy, the numbers get even better, over 2/3 of a stroke gained on approach per round. Now the off the tee play gets a little bit worse. The putter definitely comes back to earth, right? Like I said before, he's not known as a great putter on the PGA Tour. But if there's a surface where he can at least get by, it's usually on Bermuda grass. It's right around the last 50 rounds average, what we have for him there. That has been a steady improvement over the last 2 to 3 years. Back in like 2016, 2017, this guy was a better ball striker, of course. He's getting a little bit older, so he's losing some of that ball striking ability. But he was even worse with the putter. He's losing close to half a stroke per round. So if he can continue some of that momentum with the putter, he's one of the best approach players that we see out here on the PGA Tour. I like his chances to go out there, make a cut. He's solid with those long irons. If you take a look at the advanced metrics for a Cameron Percy, of course, the approach play looks great. But if we take a look at the longer metrics, he's number 61 in the world from 175 to 200 yards. Not as impressive from 200 yards plus, but historically, he has usually ranked in the top 30 on tour in both of those categories. So somebody that I'll definitely be taking a look at almost the bare minimum. All right, and now for the last part of the video, our fades and sleepers. These are going to be some of the players a little bit overhyped, my fades, and of course some of the underlooked diamonds in the rough are sleeper picks that are going to be leverage plays for these large field GPPs. We'll start off with our fades, which up top, Justin Thomas, an unfortunate fade. Is one of my favorite players in the world, but I like Viktor Hovland a lot more. I mean, last year, Hovland looked great, and JT is also somebody who deals with a little bit of inaccuracy off the tee. We know he can spray it from time to time, and when he misses fairways, he tends to do it in pretty drastic fashion. The unfortunate part about the Valspar Championship is with so many trees in play, a little bit of water as well, that could be an issue. So if we're going to have to find any reason at all to fade a JT, that's going to be what I'm going with. He's also somebody who, the course history here, it's been okay, but at the same time, it hasn't been great, right? 13th last year, miscut back there in 2017, doesn't play this event all that often. So I know we're just trying to find a reason to fade him at this point, but you can't play everyone up top. He's coming in with similar ownership to somebody like a Viktor Hovland, so it's not necessarily that he's the chalk of the chalk. That's not why we're fading him. It's more of a skill set thing. So he's somebody who will be out of my player pool. I have a lot of interest in playing Hovland, Morikawa, Dustin Johnson, and even somebody like a Louis or Xander Schauffele. One of those two guys. I want to fit a lot of those players into my pool, so playing Justin Thomas just unfortunately isn't going to be possible. Next up, we're going to have Tyrrell Hatton there at $9,800. It's not like he's a horrible play on this slate, but he's coming in with more than his fair share of ownership. And if we take a look at the long iron specifically for a Tyrrell Hatton, it's really where he starts to fall apart. If you take a look at the 200 plus yard range, he's okay in that range, but 153 from 175 to 200, 103 from 150 to 175. You're going to see a ton of shots from this 175 to 200 range. So it's not good to see that. In terms of guys up top, he's one of the worst profiles from the long iron ranges of any of these elite tier players. Xander Schauffele, it's a smaller sample size. He also has a relatively worrisome profile from some of these longer iron shots. So that's why there's not in my player pool as of right now, right? So you can see Xander's down as a blank right now. That's also why we have Tyrrell Hatton down as a fade. When you're spending up top, you're taking those studs, investing a lot of your salary into one play. You want to make sure that it's well-rounded and there's really no question marks behind it. Guys like a Hovland, a Morikawa, even Dustin Johnson just have a much better pedigree of hitting those long irons. So he won't be in my player pool. If you take a look at his recent form, of course, Tyrrell Hatton, he's actually had a pretty good stretch of form. Second place, 13th finish. Those were his first 2 starts there in 2022 on the PGA Tour. That's a lot of the reason why the price tag is where it's at. It's also why he's garnering the ownership that he is. But if you take a look at the course history, you'll see that his only trip here, he missed the cut. So this isn't a course where he has that established history like he did at an API, where he went out there and had that really solid finish, finished second, or even at a Players Championship where he'd played a number of times before. This is a golf course where the only time he showed up, he's missed the cut. So perhaps with that a little bit lower amount of confidence coming in, that goes ahead and costs him. And now lastly, somebody that we faded last week and it worked out. We also faded him the week before that. It ended up working out, is Christiaan Bezuidenhout, who the field just loves to go out and play for some reason, even though he's far from optimal. So people are talking about him like he's on this great stretch of form or something like that. For DFS, finishes, first off, this is his first start ever at the Valspar Championship. I clicked on the wrong tab there. I was trying to get to recent form here. You can see it's just middling finishes, 20th, 25th, missed cut. 20th place finish at the API was nowhere near optimal for large field GPPs. Sure, if you're playing cash, his shots gain profile is advantageous. He's somebody who gains in pretty much every shots gain category. In fact, over his last 24 measured rounds, I knew that was the case. Yeah, he's gaining 0.2, 0.18, 0.16, 0.16 with the putter. So somebody who is getting it done across the board. If you're looking for a safe play, he's somebody to go to, but this is 16% in large field GPPs. He's being higher owned than guys with much higher upside around him in the range. I mean, I'd much rather take an Adam Hadman, a Russell Knox, Kevin Kisner, or even a Webb Simpson, and all of them are much lower owned than a Christiaan Bezuidenhout. So as consistent as he's been utterly useless in the GPP realm unless you're wanting to win like 100th or 150 place in a GPP, which in the long term, guys, if that's the strategy that you're taking, it's useless. You're going to be a negative EV player with the rake. In order to be a profitable player in DFS, particularly if you're playing large field GPPs, you have to be trying to get that 0.01 percentile performance, a top 10 performance, right? That's when you really start to get those paydays, have those long-term returns. And Christiaan Bezuidenhout, I highly question his ability to do so. Now, this field isn't as strong as the Players Championship, some of the other fields that he's found himself in of late. So maybe he has a better chance of finishing in the top 5 or top 10 at this type of field, but it's no slouch for a field, right? You have guys like Hovland, Morikawa, JT, Xander, DJ, Louis, Tyrrell Hatton, just really solid players across the board. So I'm going to wait for a weaker field event to play a Christiaan Bezuidenhout, also when he's much lower owned, and perhaps comes in with a better price, because if he goes out there and misses a cut, ends up busting as chalk, you could very well see that happen. And now that we've gone through the overhyped plays, let's go ahead and talk about some of the diamonds in the rough for this week. First off, we're going to have Brooks Koepka, who killed me last week. He got the really sour end of the draw, ended up shooting 7 over par on hole number 17 for his Friday, which of course completely took him out of contention. But at $9,400, he's somebody who can get really hot with those long irons when he's playing his best golf. There is no better player from that 200 plus yard range. So he's $9,400. He's relatively low owned. You can see how much, just 6.7% expected ownership right now. And that's borderline disrespectful. I mean, for him to be half as owned as a Sam Burns, who I also love this week for the fact of the matter, or half as owned as a Shane Lowry or Tyrrell Hatton, just incorrect. He clearly doesn't have half the chance of success as both of those other players. In fact, I would argue that Brooks Koepka has much higher win equity than almost all of these players combined. I mean, of course, he's a prolific winner here on the PGA Tour. The recent form hasn't been there, right? This is why people are avoiding Brooks Koepka. Miscut 16th at the Honda, miscut at the Genesis, but third place at the Waste Management, right? So while it hasn't looked pretty, it also hasn't been as bad as people are giving him credit for. So the shots gained metrics are ugly. A lot of the miscuts have been really bad missed cuts. So it is surprising to see that he's right around neutral with all of his shots gained metrics, even despite that. I'm actually still gaining strokes total over all 4 categories. But over the last 50 measure rounds, it does get a little bit better, right? You start to see the ball striking come back. You see him gaining with the off the tee. The approach plays a little bit closer to neutral. And the putter and the around the green, they're never really going to be a massive positive for Brooks Koepka, but when he finds himself in contention, he's usually able to hold it together in those categories. Not sure whether it's him ratcheting up the intensity, the focus, whatever it ends up being. When Brooks has it with the ball striking, he tends to also bring it with the short game. So sure, he's a high risk play, high reward type of play, but coming off the miscut that burned a ton of people last week, I think he comes in even lower owned than what we saw at the Players. Next up, we're going to have Bubba Watson at $8,800. He had a pretty solid week last week, and that was despite getting the wrong end of the draw. Ended up shooting 4 under on those blistering conditions, which is by far the best round of the day. JT shot 3 under, and I believe the next best round was just 1 under. So those guys were on a completely different planet. So I like the form coming in. If we take a look at the course history for Bubba Watson, it's not that established. You can see he's played here 3 times over the last 4 years, 13th, 4th, and he missed cuts. So 2 top 13 finishes, that's pretty solid. For the recent form, he got 68th at the Players. He did fall apart on the weekend, missed cut, and then of course the 14th at the Waste Management. So it's a little bit of sneaky recent form. It's sneaky course history, right? A little bit hit or miss. And he looked really solid on that second round over there at the Players Championship. So I think that he's low owned for a reason, right? He's highly volatile, much like somebody like a Brooks Koepka. When he brings his best stuff to the table, though, he's almost impossible to beat, right? When Bubba Watson's firing on all cylinders, he's capable of taking even the hardest golf courses nuclear. Somebody that I do like for these large field tournaments. And now lastly, the last sleeper, Kevin Kisner. And I don't understand why he's a sleeper. He had a great Players Championship, right? If we take a look at the recent form, you can see he had the 4th place at the Players. The miscut of the API, we can give him a little bit of a pass for, right? Those were some really difficult conditions, but 38th at the Waste Management Open. The course history for Kisner isn't ideal, right? Miscut last year, 24th in 2019. Those are the last 2 times he's played here, but from just a eye test, right, from a historical standpoint, this should be a solid course for Kevin Kisner. It puts a lot of priority in hitting fairways. There's a lot of forced layups, which means that Kevin Kisner's lack of distance isn't going to hold him back nearly as much. And if there's one part of his approach play that he really shines at, it's with that 175 to 200 and that 200 plus yard range, which are the key approach ranges that we're looking at for this week. Of course, a great putter on Bermuda grass was filling it up last week. So in general, at just 8.6% ownership, that is higher than what we had for Brooks and Bubba. It's still somebody that I'm expecting to get quite a bit of leverage on this week. That is all I've got for this week's DFS preview. I know the format was a little bit different. It's a long video, a lot to cover. But next week, when we're getting back on schedule for the match play, everything will be back as per usual. So expect that. Look forward to that. Before we go on to get out of here, let me know down in the comments who you think ends up winning this week. For me, I do think that Victor Hovland probably adds a win to his notch here, but go ahead and let me know who you're taking down in the comments. We are going to have our weekly DFS live stream tonight. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'll make sure to put a link in the description here when I can, so you guys can set a reminder for that. But we'll be talking weather there, any of your live questions for this week, a complete breakdown of the player pool. So not just my favorite plays on the board, we'll talk about everybody that I'm putting in my pool this week. Anyone that you guys want to touch on in general, again, any of your questions. So make sure to stop on by for that. We are going to have coverage for Showdown this weekend, unlike last week, because I'll be home for Thursday and Friday, also for prize picks. So look forward to that. Make sure you like the video if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe as well. We just hit over the 1,000 mark, and now we're on the road to 2K. Best of luck this week, guys, and I'll see you guys tonight for the live stream.